Hi, and welcome back to Superliminal. And I've just had the most incredible conversation with today's guest, David Ditchfield, who very nearly died from a horrendous train accident. And most people, you would have thought, yeah, there's no way that he's going to survive. And yet, the most amazing magic has happened as he came out of that, the near death experience that he had, his reawakening of who he was. And as you'll hear in the conversation, um, his reawakening relit and reignited all the things that he'd felt when he was a child and a young person, but had been crushed through society and upbringing and schools and people around us. So true for so many of us, but it's such a wonderful message of hope and possibility that, I keep saying about this channel, we are so much more powerful than we realize we are. We're infinite creator beings having a human experience, and this conversation with David highlights that so beautifully. So yeah, I really know you're going to enjoy this one. And as always, if you could please like, subscribe, comment and share, really helps with the algorithm. But yeah, I will see you in a moment. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Superliminal. And as always, thank you ever so much for tuning in. You'll have seen from the introduction video that today I have on David Ditchfield, who's got a really incredible story. I came across David on Jeff Mara's wonderful podcast in an episode that he did some time ago now. But I was really moved by his story and what happened. And in this world that we live in, where there's so much gloom and doom, it looks like everything's closing in on us. I thought this is such a beautiful story to share with everyone, to help us realize that, the theme of this podcast is to help us realize that we're infinite, immortal, creator beings having a brief human experience, even though it looks so difficult and so hard at times. David is such a wonderful story to remind us of who and what we truly are. So, David, thank you ever so much for joining us on Superliminal, and welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much. It's great to meet you too. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me along. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. So perhaps you can start from the very beginning, from when David Ditchfield was born into the world,
Yeah.
and tell us about your life story that then led up to the incredible experience that changed your life forever.
Yeah. Exactly. Well. Okay. Well. Like you, good self. I'm a fellow Northern Englander. I was born in Blackpool, which is obviously it's a UK seaside resort, and yeah. I left there when I was about 4. So the family moved on. We moved to the Midlands, and which was great for me because it meant that where we grew up was like really beautiful, sort of surroundings in the Midlands. But we obviously went backwards and forwards, going back up to the north and visiting our family at a seaside resort, which is always great because you got the pleasure beach, which is a fantastic fun fair. So anyway, so my life was great. I felt up until I'd started senior school, then life suddenly shifted. Like for a lot of kids, actually, when you leave infantry, you're not infantry, sorry, infant school, and you go into the big secondary education system in the UK. It's a shock to the system because it's almost like survival of the fittest. If you've shown that you're able and capable of developing with your academics, then you're geared to go forward and be well educated. Whereas for the likes of me, I'd actually got learning difficulties, which I didn't realise at the time. And so once I started at the comprehensive school that I went to, I was kind of like graded down very low, and it was a struggle. I was kind of made to feel like I wasn't interested, like I was made to feel like I was lazy and almost trouble, which was a bad blueprint for me to start off my life with. So I left school with very little qualifications. And so after that, it was a case of what do I do now? The school was trying to encourage me to go and work in the local factory. which wasn't for me. There's nothing wrong with factory work. My dad worked in a factory and loved it. Had a great time there. But I don't know. I thought I'm going to try and cut my own way through life. So I started off just picking up sort of, real sort of like casual work, I guess you might say, wherever I could, working on building sites, that kind of thing. And it really wasn't happening for me where I was. So I decided I was going to move to London. I thought if I moved to London, that's the land of opportunity. And I thought that could just change my life. I had big ambitions, So I did move to London. I had a great time. When I first moved to London, I loved the energy. I loved the vibe. But it was also kind of like shining a mirror on me as well, because a lot of the people I got to know, lovely people, but they were all doing really well. They were all working like in the music industry or fashion industry, that kind of thing. And I thought I wanted to be part of that world, but I wasn't really being let into it, if you like. So I continued to get work on construction sites, working in kitchens, washing up dishes and pots and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, life was pretty much a struggle for me, and I started to run out of luck. I started to run out of work while I was there, and I started drinking heavily as well. Actually, at that point, because in all fairness, to pick up work there, it was all the place to go was the local bar, the local pub. That's where all the contractors worked. And they go there after a day's work. So you go in there to hustle work, and so I ended up spending my wages, in the pub each night drinking. And I thought the drink was kind of helping to sort of calm down that sensation of not succeeding in life, but it really wasn't helping me at all. In fact, it was just making things worse. And I got to the point where I ran out of luck. I ran out of options, and I was about to be evicted from my flat that I lived in London. So my apartment was just under threat. Everything was under threat. So my sister was living in Cambridgeshire with her young family, and she could see what I was going through, and she was very concerned about me. She said, "Why don't you come and stay with us for a couple of weeks? You need to get away from your situation." So that's what I did. And it was lovely. It was lovely to get away from it and just feel, to be fed and warmth and, almost forget about all my troubles. And, but just before I'd actually gone to visit my sister, I'd met somebody in a local bar, in a local pub, and who was working there, and she was a student, and we got on great, and so we kept in touch. And while I was staying up in Cambridgeshire, she said, "Look, I'd like to come and visit you, if that's okay." I said, "Yeah, sure." So she came up to visit, and we had a great couple of days. We had this great chemistry. It was just really lovely. And then she had to get back to London. She got some kind of appointment that she needed to get back for. So I took her down to the station in Cambridge, and I was seeing her off at that station, and that's where my whole life was about to change. That's where it all shifted from the previous life I'd led, and right up until the dramatic point of my near-death experience. So yeah, basically what happened was I was helping her onto the train with her bags and everything, and I was giving her a hug and saying goodbye. And we heard the automatic buzzers going for me to get off for the doors closing. And I remember saying, "David, come on, you got to get off." And I said, "Yeah, don't worry, I'm going." And I stepped back, and as I did, I got this sheepskin coat on because it was a very cold February day, and it was like 3/4 length, and the bottom corner of it just got trapped in the doors as they slammed to. Yeah, and it was kind of like it wasn't coming out. It was just because it was quite a thick quality coat, and it was just jammed in there. And I was used to in London, if you think, if you caught anything in bags or anything in the doors on the underground network, the doors would open, and I thought they're bound to open, and they didn't. Then I heard the engine start to rev. So I yelled for help. I called out, and nobody turned up. There was no, I didn't realize, but there was no guard working on that actual sort of system of network.
That must have felt terrifying.
It was very terrifying. I mean, I started to really, I think the moment I really, really started to feel very, very scared was when I looked through the glass and I could see my friend Anna looking straight up back at me, and I could see absolute terror in her eyes. And I thought, oh, this is not good, you know. So I started banging on the doors. I remember there's like two little rubber buttons either side of the doors that said open and close, but they weren't operating. The train engine started to rev up, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was, you know, looking death right in the eyes. I thought, this is it. I'm just going to die. I'm not going to survive this. The train started to pull out the station, and it. I felt every gear shift. You know, you don't realise how fast a train actually pulls out of a station until you're attached to the outside of it. And I I ran with it, hoping that the force of the train would pull me free, but it didn't, and I lost my footing. Then I was dragged along the platform at great speed, and then I was like pulled under between the side of the platform edge and the speeding train, and I went through that gap. And I thought, that's it, it's over. It was very vivid because I remember going into fight or flight mode, and I thought, I'm gonna fight this. Do you know what I mean? I didn't give into it, and so I remained fully conscious throughout, and suddenly I felt like I was sucked into this huge mechanical beast, and I was like being thrown into darkness and the smell of the oil and diesel or whatever on the track, and I was just thrown around relentlessly like a rag doll at great speed. And it was very violent and very aggressive and very painful. And then suddenly I was kind of thrown down in between the tracks, if you like, as the train was still continuing on above my head. So I just thought, right, it's not over yet. I could get hit by part of the undercarriage, you know. So I just kept my face right down into the gravel, you know, and kept my arms stretched right in front of me. And uh, thankfully, the train eventually moved on and went down the track. And there I was, laid. Not unbelievable that I was alive. I couldn't believe I was alive. I couldn't believe I'd survived it. And there I was, you know.
I find it absolutely astounding, David, that because normally when the guards, they wave the little flag, don't they, and then they blow the whistle, and
Yes.
they are always on the platform waiting for the train to leave. I'm absolutely astounded that nobody saw you.
Yeah, well, it's basically what it was on this actual sort of station, because it was outside, just outside of Cambridge. It's only a small station, and obviously they're trying to cut costs now with all manpower everywhere. So basically, what they got is they got like these monitors, uh, uh, which are set up next to where the train driver pulls in. So the driver looks into those monitors to be able to see whether there's anybody like myself, stuck in the doors or struggling or whatever. He looks to make sure that everything is safe. But on that particular day, there was a lot going against me because it was a really bright, low sunlight. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. So apparently he couldn't see the reflection. The reflection was so bad on it was like the similar sort of monitor that you get on your laptop or whatever. So you imagine full sunlight, and that's very hard to see. But also the platform itself was on a very large bend, on a very large curve, so he couldn't stick his head out the window and see me anyhow. So that's what happened. So I mean, I did find out later, there was, because in fact, after doing one of my interviews, somebody got in touch with me who was there that day, and she was in charge of signaling and, like the signals for, letting the trains out or whatever and stuff. And she was watching it herself from an office in the station on her computer system, and she saw the whole thing unfold, but she was powerless to be able to do anything about it. She couldn't stop the driver. She didn't have like a one-to-one, way of being able to communicate to him, and she she said to me, she apologized to me and said it was just horrific seeing the whole thing happen and unfold before her eyes, So I was glad she got in touch, actually, because I was able to get back to her and, and say what, it clearly wasn't her fault. There was nothing she could have done, But yeah, so that's why there was no guard with the flag. Those days are gone. Yeah.
I guess, yeah. So we're at the stage where finally you've been released from the grip of the train.
Yes.
You've had the instinctive sense of fight or flight, and you've instinctively chosen fight.
Yes.
You're face down, your arms are out, you're still conscious while all this is going on. Thankfully, this train's roaring past you.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that the train didn't catch you with anything as it went overhead.
That's right. Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just
So
remember.
what happened next?
I remember just I tried to get my phone. Actually, I got my cell phone in my pocket, and I thought, I was worried that another train was going to come along, and because I realised there was no one around on that platform, I thought I'm going to call my sister and get her to call the police. And of course, my cell phone was smashed to pieces, and that was, and I thought, oh no! But thankfully, the emergency guys arrived really quick. There was a small hospital around the corner, so they turned up in an ambulance, and they jumped down on the track, and they started cutting through my clothes, and somehow they got me off that track, because it's a long way down. Yeah, it's a huge drop when you're lying down there, and they got me off that track and onto the platform and on a trolley, and they got me in the back of an ambulance. Then I remember the doctor in the back saying, look, I'm not going to lie to you, in a pretty bad way, there's a small hospital around the corner that we've just come from, but the one that's really going to save you is Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge. Can you hang on? It's a 25-minute drive. I said, yeah, let's go. So the sirens went, we screamed down the highway, and we arrived at the hospital, and there was a whole team of medics, I remember, waiting there as we got in. They'd been informed what had happened. I was coming in, and they all got to work on me. I was losing a lot of blood by this stage, because it was just like, I knew that was happening, and I was worried. I thought, it's not over yet, and I could hear fear in their voices. I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was all science, of course, to me. It was all so I didn't know what was going on. They were trying to keep me calm, but they were worried. I thought, if they're worried, then that's not good. Then, but I did have a very sort of reassuring consultant who worked with me throughout my recovery as well. He was great, and he'd only just started working at the hospital, apparently. I found out afterwards. But so he was very keen to keep me calm, and he said, look, we're going to have to take you straight into surgery. He said, but before we do that, your family are here. Would you like to see them? And I said, really? They're here? Wow, yeah. So so they came in, and I saw them. My mother was in tears. She was crying and stuff, and I was saying, I remember saying to my mum, Mum, I'm so sorry. So it's me bringing the dramas to this family, because it was, and she, of course, put a hand over my mouth and said, it's not your fault, and you don't do that. So, and she was, all she could feel was love for me, which is very reassuring, and because I needed my mother's love at that point. It's amazing, I just, how that happens, that instinctive thing. I thought I needed the care of my mother, and that made me feel good. And I was more concerned about my friend Anna, because I could see her sat at the back of the room in the emergency department that I was laid in. And I said, I need to speak to Anna before I go in. So she came forward, and she was just looking at me, completely white, completely in shock. And she was just, her head was going from side to side. And she said, I can't believe you're alive. I can't believe you survived that. She said, I saw you roll under. She said, I ran through the train and I saw you go under the train. And she said, and then I eventually managed to get somebody to stop the train, and it was in the middle of the countryside when that happened, and they announced that there'd been a fatality. So I figured you were dead. She was told, it was, they were misinformed, and so she thought I was dead at that point. So she turned around to this carriage was full of commuters, and she told me that, she said, she just stood there as the train stopped in the middle of nowhere in silence, and she said, "Look, my friend's just gone under the train. Could we say a prayer for him?" And she said that this woman stepped forward and said, "Look, I'm a Christian. Would you like me to take a prayer for you?" And she said, "Yes, please." And so this woman took these beautiful prayers, and she said everyone just put down their laptops and their newspapers, and everyone prayed. And I said, "You know what? I felt the power of those prayers. I felt it. And now I believe firmly in how powerful prayers really are, you know." So, yeah. But it was at that point that I left my body, you know, just as we were talking. I left all the agony that I was in. I left, you know, the fluorescent strip that was like screaming into my eyes, you know, and I'm suddenly in a beautiful, darkened space, you know.
How did that how did that actually unfold then, David, as you became aware of losing consciousness of the material of the 3D and realizing that you were leaving your body? Could you explain that process for us, because that
Yeah,
sounds fascinating.
it is fascinating. It's a hard one to answer because it's not like something that you know, it's so different because it's kind of happens instantly, but it wasn't like a flash thing like that. But it also happened very beautifully, gracefully, and slowly, you know. It was just almost like suddenly I was there, you know, and it was like I figured I must be dead because I was there looming at the back of my mind that I might not survive. And interestingly enough, I didn't fight that. I've since heard and read that people have had NDEs. They resist it. They want to come back, normally because they've got young kids and things like that. Too much to give up. Whereas for me, I hadn't at that stage in my life, and so I didn't want to die. But at the same time, after everything I'd just been through, it suddenly felt very calm and welcoming, and I didn't concern myself about trying to fight it. I tried to get my bearings, so I looked around me and I thought, well, where am I? You know, and I looked, and as I did, uh, I was greeted by these pulsating lights. They're beautiful orbs that were just slowly pulsating all around me. They were almost like sort of landing lights on a runway, you know, as you're coming in to land on a plane. And I just thought, okay, this feels safe. This feels good. And I realised I was no longer laid on the hospital trolley that I've been on since the actual, you know, since they brought me in. I was now laid on a huge rock. It was like a big slate rock, and I looked to check my wounds because I remember when I was lying on the track, all my coat had been ripped to shreds, and I could see that my left arm had been severed. It had been cut from the elbow down, and but that was all in place. There wasn't even a single scratch or bruise. You know, everything was just as it was, as it should be. And I was no longer clothed, but I was just covered in this blue sort of satin, silky material, and that material kept me safe. It made me feel comforted. So I decided to lay back on this huge rock. It's like when I say it's a huge rock, it's like a big medieval altar. Is the way I always describe it. That's what it looks like, and the feeling, the sensation, was remarkably comfortable. You wouldn't think it would be, but it was. So I just lay back on the rock, and I closed my eyes and relaxed for the first time, then there was light coming through my eyelids. You know, it's like if you close your eyes and somebody switches a light on, you know, you can sense that light coming through. So I opened my eyes, and as I looked up, there were like three symmetrical grids of white light closing in on me, coming down towards my face, and the light was so strong. It was like a very white, pure white light. That normally in this realm, I would not be able to look into that kind of light. But here I could. In fact, I couldn't take my gaze away from it because I knew that it was more than just light. That there was a healing energy that was coming from this light, that was emanating from these grids.
Did it
And
feel like that typical? Is it the Harrow tube or the Harrow light that a lot of people who experience NDEs see? You know, the typical white light tube that then draws us back into the afterlife. Did it feel like that, or did you experience any of that at all?
I did do, yeah.
Oh, but that
That
was later. Okay,
yeah,
but
that
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 this
was
was not at
later.
this
But
stage then.
this was no, this was like the initial stage. It was exactly the same white light, but this was in on a more scaled down version, if you like, because that light was what I realized was healing the trauma that my body had just been through. And the emotional trauma as well. I felt that it was just calming me. That it was just slowly going over, just really just trying to just kind of ground me. And so that sensation was really trusty and wonderful. So I closed my eyes again and I went with the sensation. And I lay there, and then eventually then I felt the sensation of somebody had arrived at my side. And so I opened my eyes once more and I looked, and just there at my feet, actually, just beyond my feet, was this androgynous being, a person wearing like a very contemporary black t-shirt, nothing too ethereal, just a simple black t-shirt, this very, very white blonde hair, but the skin that was emanating light from within. It was just glowing in this beautiful warm glow. And this being of light had this beautiful face, but it was a face that I was very familiar with. Sometimes if you go to a party and you get chatting with somebody and you both say to each other, I feel like I've known you where I've met you before.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you both say, yeah,
completely.
that's true,
So it was
but
a
you
lovely
haven't met that
warm. It was
person.
a lovely warm, familiar energy you were feeling from that being.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I knew straight away that this person was like a gatekeeper, if you like. This person was like caring for me, and was there to watch me and to guide me through what was happening. So there was total trust in that person. And I said out loud, I said, "Who are you? I know you, don't I? Where do I know you from?" But this person just gave me a knowing smile and didn't say anything, just smiled back at me. Um, so I laid back my head once more and closed my eyes and enjoyed this sensation of being where I was. Um, then I realised there was more people had walked into the scene, if you like. So I opened my eyes once more, and there were two female forms this time, either side of me. The girl to my right was again wearing a very simple brown dress and dark skin with long brown hair, and whereas the girl to my left was wearing this beautiful sort of um, more sort of traditional outfit, if you like, and she was of Brazilian or Native American, Asian Indian descent. I couldn't work out what, but she had this beautiful white dress on, and they had their hands hovering over the contours of my body, and the energy coming from their hands was just so powerful. It was amazing. It was similar to the energy that was coming from the light, but it was more intensified. And I felt that the energy that was coming from their hands was going deeper than just healing the trauma I'd just been through. They were now starting to work on the years of trauma that I'd been through as I talked of earlier, from my school days, going through not being able to get work, all those things were being healed. They were sort of getting right down to the pure essence of my soul. They were taking off all the layers of baggage that I'd been carrying around with me, particularly in my teens and later years after that, and so it was great to feel the sensation of lightness, and there I was, down to the pure essence of my soul, me. It was just, it was wonderful. Yeah, and the energy that was coming from their hands was just like, it was one of unconditional love. It was just this sensation of love that I'd never encountered before. It was almost like all the different types of love that you go through in your life, whether it's from the love of your parents, your pet cat, your first love, your second love, your third, fourth, or fifth. All these different elements of love were all condensed and coming through the hands of these two people, and also the being of light stood at my feet. So so yeah, I started to think about my family because I was obviously I could see how traumatized they were down in the hospital, and I figured, right, well, if I am dead, if I have passed on now, then they're going to be pretty upset. So I thought I'd try and edge my way over the edge of this rock, and I thought down is the best way to look because that's probably where I'm going to see them, you know. And I looked down over the edge of the rock, and I there was no sign of them. I could not see them at all, which is fine. I could, you know, it's okay because suddenly all my sensations of guilt of, and sort of like irrational thoughts are gone. All that was gone, and I remember thinking to myself, "That's okay. I can't see them, but I'm sure I'm going to be able to see them at some point soon. And if I don't see them, they're going to be experiencing all the joys and wonders that I'm doing right now, and when they pass over." And it was at that stage that I suddenly my eyes were starting to focus, and I realized I was looking down not into darkness but into a huge waterfall of stars. It was like this. And when I say a huge waterfall, it was just like, you know, the size of Victoria Falls, Niagara Falls, you know, and but instead of billions of tons of water cascading over the edge, there were billions of sparkling stars that were just flying over the edge, and there was shooting stars just hovering over. You know, it was just an amazing sight, and I went, "Wow!" I thought, I'm not in a small darkened space at all that I figured I first was. I'm actually in the universe. And I felt the sensation of being amongst the universe. And as I looked down, you know, my gaze was fixing, and I started to see nebulas forming like I'd never seen before. I'd never had any interest in the universe whatsoever. You know, to me, the universe was like occasionally looking up at the dark sky at night and just seeing blackness with sparkling stars, and that's it. No, there was all these beautiful colors that were formations, you know, that were just really overwhelming me in a beautiful way. And so yeah, so I pulled myself back over, and again was closed my eyes and was basking in the glory of just now feeling this sensation of being pulled forward through the universe itself. And it was at that stage that I did see the tunnel of white light, as a lot of people call it, coming towards me. It was coming through the universe. It was coming through the stars, and it was getting closer. And it was surrounded by all these very dramatic flames that were kind of rolling around the edge of this white light. And I thought, wow. And again, normally something like that, seeing it for the first time, because I knew nothing about NDEs at this point. I didn't even know what was going on. Rather than any fear overwhelming me, there was just a sensation of like, this is remarkable. And in fact, I was starting to realize that information was coming through telepathy, if you like. Thought patterns were telling me that what I was looking at here was the source of all creation. You know, this was God. This was not God in the form that I'd always figured in my school books. You know, the guy with the long grey beard on that Michelangelo painted on the ceiling of the Vatican in Rome. No, or whatever faith or religion. There's normally some kind of human sort of attachment to God. But no, it was this beautiful, huge tunnel of white light that was getting closer and closer with these flames that were getting stronger and stronger. And the energy and the pull that came from that light was just like the unconditional love that I've been talking about throughout, now intensified and turned up like a large dial had just been turned up to full factor, you know. And I remember just, I laughed out loud with joy because it was just so beautiful. And it was at that point that I threw my head back onto the slowly that was onto the huge rock, that I was suddenly back in my body in the hospital. I'd left all this, and I suddenly came back to the hospital, and I was laid on the hospital trolley again, and all that beautiful light that I'd been staring at was again replaced by the fluorescent strip. And I remember the sound of that hospital ward was just, well, not the ward, sorry, the A&E department was just so loud. It was like a sort of shrill in my ears, and it was like overload. And I just thought, wow, what was that? And why have they sent me back? Why am I here? You know?
you'd literally just gone from being connected to what I think most people would call the void, which is the infinite field of information of all that is,
Yes.
that we're all an infinite part of. And just when you are basking in this incredible high that you didn't think was possible and had no awareness of before, all of a sudden you're back.
I'm back, yeah.
How did that feel, that realization that you're back?
It was okay, you know. I mean, you know, I remember a lot of people I spoke to said, "Oh, you must have been really gutted," you know, after that incredible experience. And I said I wasn't at all, because I was just so filled with all the joy of it all, and I felt like there was like this kind of umbilical cord still attached to that realm throughout
Yeah,
while I was in hospital, you
I
know.
was going to ask you that if you still managed to maintain the connection after you drop back into your body.
Yeah, it was there with me. It was just so strong. You know, I remember when I was in the hospital. I mean, it's like it's. I went into theatre pretty much at that point, you know, and I was under for about 8.5 hours, I think, the first operation. And I remember they giving me my own room in the hospital, so I was there, and I remember coming through, and it was about 2 a.m, and I was just got this little R2D2 machine bleeping next to me, you know, and it was just me in there with that machine. And of course, you know, all the human factors had come back. I was just thinking back to what had happened, the train accident, dealing with the enormity of that. But in all fairness, all I could really think about was this experience that I just had. Because, like I said, I knew nothing of near-death experiences, and I thought, what has just happened, and why they sent me back? I must find out what my goal is, my mission, and I wanted to follow it through. You know, I didn't want to let this go, and I wanted to tell everybody about it. You know, I wanted to make sure that people knew about this. So, and I
Yeah,
was scared I was going to forget. You know, I was
yeah.
scared.
So when you were in that beautiful non-physical realm, David, was there? Because I hear I've listened to a lot of NDE interviews and conversations, and a lot of the time, what people will say is that whichever entity or energy they're speaking with, not necessarily vocally, but telepathically, or even deeper than telepathy, as you mentioned earlier, is that there's often a sense of the person who's experiencing the NDE does not want to go back at all, and the other entity is saying, you have a mission to fulfill, although the mission's never actually um, quantified or clarified specifically,
Mm.
but the general feeling from people is, which is beautiful. You're one of the rare people I've heard who said, like, I wasn't bothered at all about coming back, but you had no sort of sense of that conversation as such, of someone saying to you, you have to go back, and you saying, well, actually, no, I just want to stay here.
Mm. I guess it's because, like I say, there was a part of me that was still very much in that entity, in that other realm, even though I was back in the physical body in the hospital. I remember my parents, when they came in, because it took me a week to tell them about what had happened. I wanted to tell everybody, as I say, and I, because they're both Christian, and I just thought it's probably going to gel with all the stuff that they go to church and they're taught, and I wanted them to get it. It was very important to me. And when I did tell them, I remember I finished telling them, and my mother turned around, call it a mother's instinct, I don't know, but she said, "We know." I said, "You know?" I said, "How do you know that this all happened to me?" She said, "David, we come into this hospital, we walk into this room you're in, and you've got tubes and wires coming out of you." But she said, "But we both leave here feeling happy, because you've just kind of you're glowing." She said, "You just so," and my friends were saying I look really animated. You know, there was a sense which, and they couldn't believe it. Everyone was expecting the worst, and
That's so
so
beautiful.
it is beautiful, isn't it? And it's a beautiful observation to come from my mum, you know, that to see her son, you know, and the reason I was glowing is because, as I say, I was still my energy was still being fed from what I'd just been through, and I think um, the fact that I was so intent of finding out what my goal and mission was helped, and the fact that I wasn't suppressing it and worrying about telling people that, I mean, I remember when I was in hospital, I started going to the physio gym, in the hospital to start recovering. And we used to sit down at the end and have a coffee and stuff, and all the people, most of them are amputees in there. And I remember I told my story to everybody, and everyone listened, and that was the first time I'd sat down and told a group of people. I thought, this is lovely, telling everyone. And then there was this guy pulled me to one side afterwards, a really young guy, and he said, mate, he said, that thing you just said happened to you? I said, yeah. He said, same thing happened to me. And I said, really? I said, what happened? And he said that he was being chased on a stolen motorbike going up the motorway at 120 miles an hour and came off. And he said he came off, and he said, and he had a near-death experience basically, but he said he hadn't told anybody. He said, no, all my mates will just think I'm mad, So I just said to him, no, please don't. You've got to share this, It's like trying to keep suppressing something that's really important, So whether he told anyone, I don't know. But for me, there was no question of not telling people about it, yeah.
So I mean that's so amazing. I'm really struck by that particular point about your parents and your mum in particular being such devout Christians, and yet still openly feeling on such a heartfelt level that what you were sharing was true. There was clearly no doubt about that, no contradiction for them at all within that experience that you shared with them, which is amazing, because I know that, again, other people I've listened to who've had NDEs, who themselves have been very religious beforehand. It's actually just completely, it's generally either changed their worldview completely and they've let go of what they thought life or existence was, or sometimes they come back and it's challenged them very, very deeply and caused a lot of problems with family and friends who are also very in the belief set of Christianity. And for anyone listening, this is not to criticize, it's merely an observation.
No, I know,
so
exactly.
For you to experience that with your mum in particular, I think must have been such a heart expanding, soul expanding experience for you, that she that they accepted that so easily and felt the truth of it themselves.
They did do, yeah. I mean, my dad passed a couple of years ago, and it was interesting because when my book came out, I gave him a copy, and I'd written in the back, thanks, Dad, because he used to run me backwards and forwards to the hospital when I was in the outpatient, to all the appointments for a couple of years, and we got to know each other really well at that point. But I never really knew what he felt about it all and stuff like that. But I gave him the copy of the book and stuff like that, and he started to get quite ill, so I thought, well, he's not going to really have a chance to read this. And what was really lovely that at the wake of his funeral, a lot of his care workers turned up. These young girls, used to come in and care for him each day. And one girl walked up to me. She said, "Oh, you know what?" She said that we loved your dad. He was great. I said, "That's lovely." And she said that he used to ask me each day to read a chapter from your book out loud to him. And it was just that was just, wow, that was brilliant. I'm feeling it now. That emotion was just it was just great. That I didn't even know, he hadn't even told me himself. But I found out through this young girl, this young carer who I'd never met before in my life, that very personal fact. So that meant a great deal, of course.
And to a large degree, it would have been more impactful for you finding out that way as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of the fact that it was at the closing part of his chapter, on his journey, as it were. I hope that it helped him. I hope that the book helped him, with his passing.
Yeah, very much so. So you obviously made a full recovery, otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation, David, which is absolutely wonderful. So what happened next then from hospital to where you are now? Obviously the trajectory of your life changed very much so, and some rather incredible things happened along the way that you wouldn't have imagined beforehand.
They did do, yeah, they did. Basically, what happened was when I was in that hospital, as I say, I was worried about forgetting the whole thing. So I thought I need to sketch this down. So I remember asking my sister on the very first night she came to see me. She said, "Is there anything I can get you?" And I said, "Yeah, can you get me a small sketch pad and a pencil?" And she went, oh, "Okay," because I wasn't an artist, at all. So she brought that all in and said, "There you go." And so I started sketching. I remember I've still got this very faint sketch, but there's no point in me showing you wouldn't see it, of what I'd seen and what I'd experienced. The nurses propped me up in all my pillows, and I thought, right, at least it's sketched there now. And thought, when I get out of hospital, I'm going to do this on a huge painting. And I thought it's got to be a huge kind of, like those Renaissance Michelangelo paintings, the big dramatic biblical scenes. I wanted to do something like that. So I did. I started this painting. Obviously, I was apprehensive to start it because I didn't want to mess this up. But you know what? Once I'd started on it, it was coming together so beautifully, and I knew that I was still getting help from this other realm. I felt like I was getting a crash course on how to paint skin tones, be brave with colors, and just to be able to create what I'd seen, and it was all starting to come alive. It took me some time to do, but I remember each day when I was working on it, I used to just stand back and look up and think, wow, this is amazing. This is just like this is so exciting. And I thought, this is not just me painting this, somebody else is helping me, and whoever it is, I used to say thank you so much, which I still do. Whatever I'm doing now, I still give out thanks, because it's like, it's like channeling ideas through that I never thought were possible. So yeah, so I started on this very one painting, and it started to come alive. What happened was that a lot of synchronicity seemed to fall into place for me, I felt, as I was starting this painting. In fact, I'd started on it, and some friends of my sister's run a local Pilates yoga center, and they came along to my sister's house one day, and they said, "How's that painting coming along?" I said, "Well, I'm struggling because I haven't really got much space or light in this room, And then they said, "Well, we've got a spare studio space going for a week. You can come and finish your painting there." So I said, "Great." So I went in, and it was this lovely, well lit studio, and it started to really come alive then. I didn't get it finished by the end of that week, but that was fine. They said, "You can stay on. We'll move you around, from studio to studio," which they did. And I ended up staying there for 2 years, and I ended up being prolific. I couldn't stop painting. So I was doing all these different paintings that were all based around my experience. And not only that, people used to come out. I was known, as they told me on the reception, as the artist in the attic. And so people were coming through for yoga and Pilates sessions, and they would come up and say, "What, can I see your painting?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And I would explain what it was. And I realized how many people were interested in the story of it all. So that really encouraged me. And then I found out I wanted to find this. I knew there was a spiritualist church that was very nearby, because I was recovering at my sister's house, so I was still at the same place in Cambridge. And when I was well enough, I said, I want to go and find this church, because I think they may be able to help me unravel exactly what happened, And so I found it eventually. It was like I knew it was there, and it was like a doorway in this alley, my sister and I used to walk down to the river and with her kids and feed the ducks and swans, and I couldn't find it. Then suddenly one day I thought, there it is. There's the doorway. That's the place, and people were going in. There was a service, so I went into it, and it was packed. And at the end of that service, there was like a guest medium who'd come along, and stuff, and she was chatting and stuff, and it was I remember at the end of that session, we would have coffees and stuff and what have you, and somebody came up to me and she said, "Look," she was a German lady, and she said, "Look, we do spiritual healing here. Would you be interested in coming along? You look like you in a pretty bad way." And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I started having spiritual healing, and in those sessions of healing, they would get, like, some of them were clairvoyant, and I'd get messages coming through them, saying I could see blue light coming through or whatever. But there was a common thread going through each week, and they'd be saying, when I'm hearing music, I'm hearing Wagner, Beethoven, and I was seeing a violin laid across your chest. And I said, I have no idea why. And then one of them said, you're going to write a piece of music about your experience. So I went away, and with no classical training whatsoever, I started writing a piece of music on a little old synthesizer I got out of the loft. And my dad's old cassette recorder started writing this piece of music, And one of the people who used to come into the Pilates Centre was a cellist in the local orchestra. And I told her about what was going on. We met for coffee one day, and she said, maybe our orchestra could have a look at it. I said, that would be great. So, yeah, my brother, who was living down in London, he said, look, if you're doing this with an orchestra, you can't just give them cassettes of what you're doing. They need to have it written out in musical formats. So he said, I'm going to give you my old computer, and I'm going to give you this program, which when you play on your sort of keyboard, it will convert it into musical notation. So that's what we did. And I took it along to the orchestra, and they said, yeah, we'll do it. And they performed it. And more synchronicity started to happen. It was like the local press got involved, and they were excited about it. They said, you're the guy who went under the train. It's going on the front cover and all that. Then the next thing I knew, the BBC said, we want to come down to do a piece on your story and come to a rehearsal. And I said, great. So they came down and filmed it and interviewed me. Then after that went on TV. The concert sold out 2 weeks in advance, which was amazing, And so I was really pleased. There was no sense of ego involved in this. I just wanted people to come along and get a sense of what had happened to me through my artwork and then through my music. And the atmosphere on that night of the premiere was just tremendous. It was just beautiful. And I was sat on the front row with my family, and I remember the conductor's baton coming down, and then just, there was this beautiful, as that happened, I looked, and it was a converted church, the venue. And I remember seeing like a dove landed just on the windowsill and was just there on the window ledge, as the performance was going through. And I wasn't the only person to see that dove. And other people pointed out to me afterwards as well. So I sat through it with my family, and I just closed my eyes, and I was just transported back, going through the whole journey. I was able to enjoy it and not feel nervous about it. It's an amazing sensation having an orchestra perform music that you've written without any qualifications or with qualifications. It sounds great. And anyway, it finished, and there was a massive round of applause, and my mother was in tears again, but this time tears of joy, and I was hugging her, and then my sister said, David, look behind you. I said, what? And I looked behind it, and there was a standing ovation. It was just like, wow. And it was just, I thought, yeah, everyone got it. Everybody just got it. And everyone was going along that journey along with me. And so that was a tremendous achievement. And I realized from then on, that this was where my life was going to take me. So, that I was going to, so I continued painting. And in fact, I got a commission straight away off that performance as well, off another orchestra to write something else. So, I just kept bouncing along, and, the synchronicity seemed to continue, I guess, in a really beautiful way. There was no sense of me pushing for it either. I hardly did any self-promotion whatsoever, other than when I was asked, if I was asked to do an interview for any newspaper or magazine, I would do it, of course, and I loved it. But I didn't really push myself out there. Yeah,
I'm really feeling that as you're speaking, David, just in terms of you actually getting out of the way of the ego construct of David Ditchfield, and actually just totally being from the heart, and then the universe is just doing the rest. Because now, after that experience and after the healing that you received whilst you were out of body, but then simultaneously the physical healing and then the spiritual healing, because of course everything's interconnected, and then that seems to have just aligned everything within all of your bodies, your physical body, your mental body, your energetic body, your spiritual body, your etheric body, that's then connected you directly to your true passion, your true purpose, the infinite creativity that lies here in each and every one of us. And it's amazing, isn't it, when we get our egos out of the way. And as you say, you're not doing it for applause. You're not doing it to be seen and be noticed. You're doing it purely for love. And as a
Exactly. Yeah.
result of that, then the people who come and listen to what you've created from that love are then themselves healed. And it creates this beautiful cumulative effect in the, I can never get this word right, morphogenic or morphogenetic field that Rupert Sheldrake talks
Brilliant.
about,
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
where of course, especially when a number of people are on the same frequency and in the same level of expanded awareness, it contributes to the collective consciousness of humanity. And that in and of itself then feeds back into you. And that magic and that creativity just keeps flowing and keeps amplifying. And I just love that you said, you've done no real promotion, and yet everything has just come because you've just kept following the whispers and haven't let fear get in the way of anything. And you've just gone like, do you know what? I've never done this before, but I feel it, so I'm
Yeah.
going to do it. And then
Exactly.
look
Yeah.
what happens. It's just
Yeah.
so. I really wanted to draw that out because there'll be
Great.
people listening to this conversation who'll be going, "That's so beautiful, and it's such a wonderful story," but yet I've got things to do. I've got money to make. I've got this to look after. I've got that to do. I've got this to do. And whilst yes, there are things in this 3D material world that we live in that need to be taken care of, I think what you've shared there is a really beautiful message to everyone to say that you can still take care of all those things, but actually get out of your own way and let your own wisdom flow, which I'm guessing you will have experienced in terms of the feedback you get from people again and again and again from the magic that you've created from your true wisdom.
Yeah, thanks. That's beautifully summed up, really beautifully summed up, and I totally agree with you on that. Yeah, it's I think once you move the egoic mind, as I call it, to one side and allow it to come through from that authentic place, whatever that authentic place is for any one of us, then it also starts to fit together because the universe wants us to create. The universe wants us to be moving forward, and wants us to experience love and to share it, and all those amazing things. And we've forgotten all that, We've forgotten that we're part of the animal kingdom, and the rest of the animal kingdom follows all that. You look at birds, and you see, you go down to Brighton and you watch all those starlings, sort of circling. I forgot what the word is for it when they circle around in the sky, and then they eventually land, and they're all following each other. There's that synchronicity going on there, and they're following the laws of the universe, and just like the whole animal kingdom. I mean, they it's just like where I am now, I can look out my windows and I can see birds migrating, birds arriving in the spring. You hear the sound of bird song change, the leaves start to appear on the trees, everything, the whole of nature is tuned in to that energy force. And we are as well. But the trouble is we've developed so much, as human beings that we've kind of forgotten that. I'm guilty of it as well because I mean, I wake up in the morning. I don't just naturally wake up. I have a, my phone wakes me up in the morning and stuff like that. So I love technology and I use it, but I don't completely rely on it. And I try to align myself with the universe as much as possible because I realized that was part of my lesson as I talked about when I was in that near-death experience was that we're all part of the universe, that we're all part of it. And that's what I felt when I was there. So it's really important. Yeah. I mean, having a near-death experience is nothing, special in terms of we can all find that. Yes, I mean, it was just I needed that lesson, I guess, and that happened to me. So, a spiritual awakening can come just
Yeah.
from here, basically, from in there.
And that is the good news. Not everybody needs to be dragged under a train to be
No,
able
you don't.
to experience this. I mean, we'd probably advise against that. But I think this is the thing because I hear this so much all the time, David. People will say like, "How on earth do I do this?" And it's such a simple thing to begin to do. We don't need to make enormous changes overnight. Just do a simple thing like start doing a little bit of meditation. Start getting your feet on the grass, ground with the earth every day. Start going for some walks in nature and switch the phone off and leave the phone at home, just even for 10, 15 minutes, and build that into your the routine and the pattern and the playbook of your life. And it's incredible how quickly you'll feel that connection with everything. Like walk through a forest, um, and actually just try and connect with the consciousness of the trees from your heart, which is something that I've done a lot in recent years, and it's
Yes.
incredible because you can feel all the different energy as you walk through the forest.
Yeah,
And I'm
absolutely.
sharing that not because I'm someone special. It's an inherent and inbuilt part of every single one of us. But the problem is we've become so busy in our heads and so mentalized because of the way the world is structured and how we've been programmed and how we taught life should be, when actually the truth of who we are is exactly the opposite. And I think your incredible story and the magic that's come from that, and the beautiful way you share it with this lovely warm energy, is such a great example for people who are thinking, well, how do I do that? It's actually way easier than people imagine.
Absolutely. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
agree.
really is. So we're coming up to time. I mean,
Mm.
I could listen to you share for hours and hours, but
Oh, thanks.
what's next for David Ditchfield then on your journey?
Right. Well, I'm currently working on a commission for the spiritualist church that I taught of, that I walked in through their doors years ago, and they commissioned me to. I did a talk there last year on my
Yeah.
near-death experience, and they commissioned me to do a painting for their to go on their wall, which is going to be a really big one. And I'm really this feels like one of the most important paintings that I've done actually so far. It's really dear to my heart, and I'm enjoying the process so much. That I don't want it to end. I'm kind of like, whenever I've done paintings, whenever they leave, they're like children. You think, oh no, I hope they're going to be safe. But anyway, it's got nothing to do with that. I'm actually enjoying doing that. So at the moment, that's where I'm at. I'm completing that painting really. So yeah, I just tend to sort of work on it's amazing how these things happen, like that painting came along at the right time and I started doing that. And just as I'm coming towards a close on that, I'm working on a new piece of music. I had the first movement, we had a run through with the orchestra, and that sounded great. That's called I Wasn't Expecting This. And so I'm also working on that. So after Christmas, beginning of the new year, I'll be getting back to that. So it's kind of like the music and the art tend to sort of run alongside each other, and they just find their own way of coming in, and there never seems to be like some kind of like traffic jam of like worrying that one thing's got to be finished quickly before I can start on the next. Deadlines seem to come in just at a nice gentle pace, so that's really good. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
I love that. That's just really beautiful. So at the end of each conversation, David, we have a little three-question quick fire before we wrap up. So, what are you most excited? The first question is, what are you most excited about right now?
Oh, well, um, like I say, I'm excited about this. I'm excited about the work I'm doing. It's just I feel a sense of like of joy just coming through when I'm working on either my paintings or my music. I get so immersed in it, I look forward to waking up each day and getting started on it, and it's just because it's also part of my spiritual growth as well. That I'm just kind of like I'm finding that the ideas that are coming through again, they're channeling through. There's no real master plan. When I said to the church, okay, what would you like me to do in this painting? They said, well, we want to leave that to you. That's you decide. So, and in all fairness, it's not me who decided how this painting came together. It came through from somewhere else. It came through from my higher self, if you like. And so because that's the case, there's no sense of of ego getting in its way. So it's just an enjoyable process for me, just doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really where I'm at with it all and stuff. Yeah.
So beautiful. And then imagine for a moment you've just stepped into a time machine
Mm.
and the doors close. You hear the whirring, you hear yourself traveling through time, and then you hear the machine stop, the doors open, and there's 12-year-old David in front of you. What two pieces of advice would you give that young lad?
Oh, the first one is the most important one, and then actually I learned that when I was going through this experience, and that was self-love, and that I wasn't this huge mess that I thought I was. I wasn't this lazy, inattentive boy. That I was a beautiful child that was sensitive and had got all this creativity within inside me, but it was kept down. It was suppressed. And I would tell that 12-year-old boy to have faith and just follow my dreams. Follow that through. Don't listen to the adults that are trying to sort of put a label around my neck and with great weight. And yeah, and I'd also tell that 12-year-old boy that there's no rush. There's no rush, and if things go wrong, there's no rush to fix them. Just go with it. Just roll with it.
I love that, David, because it resonates with my early life experience so powerfully. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And then finally, in your opinion, based on this wonderful vibration that you're in, what would you say the number one thing is wrong with the world right now? And what one thing would you advise to solve it?
Oh, right. Well, I guess really it's that thing astronauts say. Astronauts. I started watching a lot of programs on space and the universe after my NDE because I was fascinated by all that, and I started seeing these interviews with astronauts who are the ultimate scientists, who are non-spiritual, but they were coming back, and I could see through their words, especially the first guys who went to the moon on Apollo 11, and when they looked back at the Earth, they were saying, looking back at the planet Earth, from this white dusty moon that they were stood on, was like looking back at heaven. And when they came back through the Earth's atmosphere, they came back into Earth. They said that Earth was just so full of color and full of so much beauty, and that's I feel that's where the world is going wrong. We don't realize that. We don't realize that we are living in this beautiful, beautiful world, and that not only that the planet itself is a living thing. Like you were talking about the trees. The trees have so much history. They've lived longer than any single animal or mammal or bird on this earth. They've lived for hundreds of years. And all these different things. The Mother Earth is a living, beating soul, and where we're going wrong is obviously that we're humankind is kind of like punishing it and pushing it to its limits, and so yeah, so I guess that's where we're going wrong. I know it's a typical ideal that I'm sure I've heard it said a few times on the news, but if you could take all the world leaders, put them on a space ship and send them out to space and just get them to orbit around the planet a few times and then send them back to Earth, I wonder where we'd be at. I wonder whether they would come back and say, do you know what, we need to fix this rather than trying to destroy ourselves and it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you've said that, David, because it reminds me of something I heard. Who started the Institute of Noetic Sciences? Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut. And he would talk often in some of his early interviews when he came back, which is really what started to awaken him. He would say that when you get out of Earth's atmosphere, because of all the discordant electromagnetic energy that we've created around the planet, and this is like back in the 60s and 70s, so clearly it's much, much more intense now. But he said once you got actually out into space, he said everybody, all of them without fail, would notice that suddenly they were way more able to connect to their higher selves.
Yes.
And as you were saying, to the consciousness of Mother Sophia, our planet, to the
Mm,
consciousness of the moon, and they were followed by ETs everywhere, and they said
mm,
they were often communicating with them telepathically, as well. But he said that was the one thing they really noticed, was that
yes.
all of a sudden it was like their antennas were just set free to be able to connect to the non-physical energies. That,
Mm.
yes, we can't see them, but we can absolutely connect to them. And so I think your suggestion for the world leaders is a very powerful one, because hopefully the same would be true for them. But that said, I do think things are beginning to change. I just hope
So do
it's
I.
soon enough and quickly enough.
I think so, and I think that the human world consciousness is changing. I think that's got a lot to
Yeah.
do with it, because I think it's not just down to the world leaders. You know, obviously they're in the driving seat, unfortunately, but I think it's down to us to come together and tune in to our conscious souls and our higher selves, and just have faith and love for this planet, and want it to achieve and want it to move forward. And that is a huger energy than just one or two men, as they are pretty much throughout the world, you know, that are sat
Yeah.
in the driving seat. You know, we, as a collective, you know, we can just start to have faith, you know, because it's not all that bad. There's a lot of goodness out there as well. Unfortunately, the media, you see, is all obviously geared for. It's far more geared for negative things happening in life, isn't it? You know, there's not that much good news, you know. And the good people are out there. The good, you know, the majority of people are good. You know, they're good souls. You know, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's not full of people who are out there just to try and sort of slaughter each other and stuff. It's so yeah, so I also say that it's important to watch a little bit of news each day, but not to get hooked into it, because the media, it's something that's gone on for years. I mean, it's gone on going back to the days when it was just tabloid newspapers or whatever, you know, that, you know, when the Titanic sunk, for example, you know, you know, it was all over the front pages. Titanic sinks, thousands die, and all things like that. So it's nothing new. Everyone says, "Oh, it's the internet that's changed all this," but that's not true. You know, the media has always turned around and said, "Right, we need a hook. We need a line that's going to get everyone to go and buy our newspapers." And so it's the same with media now. Everyone's looking for that hook that's going to draw you in and say, "I can't switch this off. I've got to watch this. This looks important. This looks scary." You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one thing that I've said on this. I've said on Superliminal many times in conversations, and I say to anyone who asks me, what can I do to start to begin to um, connect with myself again? And one of the first things I always say is switch off the news, switch off the TV, stop watching social media feeds for news. Yes, as you've mentioned, I think it is wise to be aware of what's going on, read the headlines, keep an outline overview of what's going on in the world. But being like my parents who are still alive, you go up to their place and it's 24/7 Sky News,
Yes.
BBC
Yeah.
News.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can we please just switch the TV off? It's like 3 hours later, we're still listening to the same things, and
Exactly.
they're
It
still
is.
like glued. And of course, it's
Yeah.
just it because of course it gives
It's
that
feeding,
dopamine
isn't
hit
it?
of fear, and
Mm.
because fear does sell, unfortunately, for
Yeah,
so many
that's it.
people. But
Yeah.
I do say just switch it off.
Yeah,
Switch it
exactly.
off
Let's.
and reconnect with yourself. Have a conversation with your children. Have a conversation with your partner, with your parents. Have a conversation with nature.
Mm.
Just stop watching the news all the time.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And realize that you're
Anyway,
not actually there. Go on, sorry.
no, go on, go on.
Yeah, and just realize that you're not actually, not all of us are thankfully in that war zone, for example, or whatever it is you may be watching. Actually turn around to yourself. I'm actually sat here in a comfortable, warm house, hopefully, at this moment in time, and not to sort of get drawn into that energy, because if you're watching it throughout the day, like you say your parents are, then suddenly your mind is telling all your sort of sensories that you're in a danger zone, that you're under threat, and to go through that on a daily basis is not healthy, is it? It's not good. It's not good for the
Yeah,
soul.
yeah, it's very unhealthy on every level. But
Yes.
anyway, David, thank
Okay.
you
Yeah.
so much for
Pleasure.
this beautiful conversation. I know it's going to be really valuable to a lot of people. But before we wrap up, where can people find you? Where can people find your work? And how can people connect with you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can follow me on social media through Instagram, Facebook, or maybe the best thing is to go to my website, and which is called shineonthestory.com. Because my book that it's so shineonthestory.com. Sorry, yeah, just if you go through there and you'll find my social media links. I say that because then you can find out what's happening with my artwork. Once I'll be sort of putting up more information on what's happening with the latest painting and the latest bits of music, and you can look at some of my previous work as well. Also, if you go to my website, you can stream that first symphony that I did for free. You can listen to that on there. So I will listen on there, or SoundCloud. So yeah, there we go.
Beautiful, thank you. And I will, of course, put all this in the show notes for everybody as well. So, David, I cannot thank you enough. It's been such an honour to have you on Superliminal and hear such a wonderful story of hope for everyone as well, and what a beautiful story of reminding people of who we are. From such a terrible situation to have come out the other end of it with all this magic flowing through you and helping to sort of amplify and stimulate the magic in other people as well, I think is the most beautiful love story of a person's life. So thank you ever so much for sharing, and it's been great having you on Superliminal.
It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you. And for everybody watching, as usual, I'm so grateful. Thank you for staying tuned. And as usual, if you can share using the share function in YouTube, I will be doing a backup channel in Odyssey as well shortly, but I'll put the information in for that, just in case YouTube decide that some of the things we talk about might not necessarily resonate with them. Please comment, like, subscribe, and as always, thank you ever so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.